Folks, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I'll explain. Number one, it's absolutely free, means you don't pay a dime out of pocket. Number two, you can use creation tools to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, like I'm doing with my phone. Number three, if you want to hear it on multiple platforms, Anchor can do that for you. So you can hear it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, among others. And the thing is, you can make money without anybody listening, as little as that. And everything you need to do is to make a podcast is all here. To get started, please download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You'll be glad you did. Morning, everybody. This week's guest has covered North Carolina since May of 2018 for Inside Carolina, former wide receiver at the University of North Carolina, and he hosts the podcast on Inside Carolina. I'm joined by Taylor Vippolis of Inside Carolina. Taylor, good morning.
It's great to always hear your voice every year. I look forward to
Thank you.
the Miami game every year just to get the chance to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. Taylor, a couple of things. Last year, we all know the deal at Hard Rock. Carolina blew the Canes out 62-28, and everyone here has been talking about that for the past year, about how the defense has gotten, how the defense will do in this game. I found something that I felt was in your podcast last week when you said that it was very disheartening to lose to FSU for the second straight year. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a team that brings back, I think, 17 starters from last year, 21 starters if you're looking at just the Orange Bowl performance, where it was a pretty good showing from North Carolina against a pretty good Texas A&M team, I thought. And it's a team with all this returning experience. The entire offensive line came back, and it seems that the team is regressing, and it's disheartening because it's year three of Mac Brown, year three of Jay Bateman at defensive coordinator, year three of Phil Longo. It's the same systems, and it's a team that feels like it's going backwards. And if it's not going backwards, it's at least making the same mistakes it made in year one. So it's a lot of things that I think you would expect a team to clean up in year three. It's bad angles, going for tackles. It's missed tackles. It's receivers not creating separation, a quarterback who sometimes can still struggle going through his progressions, and an offensive line that's given up 22 sacks at this point. It's a lot of the same mistakes, and I think a lot of people were expecting Carolina to take that next leap, especially when you look around in the ACC. It's a pretty down year for the ACC, and the Coastal. It's every year where the Coastal seems like it's just waiting for somebody to take it, and nobody's been able to do that so far.
Yeah, no, I noticed that too. When we lost to Virginia, when Miami lost to Virginia 2 weeks ago, 16 days ago, I mean that was very, very heartbreaking loss. And yet, when you guys played Virginia, you let them up for 59 points. I mean, like you said, it's a wide open ACC this year, especially believe it or not, even with Clemson down, that's still a down year, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point. I Before this year started, I thought that this Miami Carolina game would be the one to kind of decide the Coastal, but you're looking at where Carolina is now. They're 3-3. They're 2-3 in conference. It seems like this isn't going to be Carolina, and the year I thought this Miami Carolina game could have been like a college game day, where college game day comes to Chapel Hill, and with UNC being 3-3, Miami being 2-3, it seems like Manny Diaz could be on his way out, and just a whole overhaul of the entire Miami athletic department. It seems like it's only a matter of time, but I think both fan bases would be pretty surprised right now that these two teams are where they are at this point in the season.
Yeah, you mentioned Miami's athletic department and Manny. If you I don't know, I don't know if I'm promoting this, but if you listen to a podcast called Orange Bowl Boys, Listen
Mhm.
to Alonzo Highsmith this morning. What he said this morning was mind blowing. It gives you a state of how the Miami program is now. Now, no about now. How is it like with North Carolina?
Yeah, I think the overall thought for North Carolina is it's still positive. It's still a program that's trending in the right direction. A lot of people have a lot of faith in athletic director Bubba Cunningham, and a lot of people obviously have faith in Mac Brown. I think the thought process for North Carolina is it's that the recruiting is still going great for Mac Brown. When you look at where this team ranking is and compared to where they were before Mac Brown came, Mac Brown he's still getting a lot of big recruits, and the recruiting they haven't been they haven't been taken back by Carolina's slow start this year, or maybe not realizing the preseason expectations when they were a top 10 team in preseason, which sounds just crazy to say at this point when you look at this team and they lose to Florida State, they lose to Georgia Tech, they lose to Virginia Tech. At this point, I don't think people it's not a fluke when you lose three times and you look this bad at times in games. And Carolina, they still have the 13th best recruiting class according to 24/7 coming in next year. And I think a lot of people are encouraged by where this program still is going under Mac Brown. I think they're looking for a few changes and a few shakeups there. But overall, I think it's a fan base that understands a lot of Carolina's best talent right now, they're sophomores on the defensive side of the ball, or they're sophomores like wide receiver Josh Downs. So for Carolina, it's a lot of people who understand that Mac Brown. This really wasn't ever going to be a 3-year rebuild where they become national contenders. I think that was a bit optimistic, but for Carolina, it's all going to be do they hit on this next quarterback, kind of like you saw where they go from Taj Boyd to Deshaun
Lawson,
Watson
Lawrence.
to Lawrence to even DJ, who doesn't have necessarily the skill positions around him. So for Carolina, it's going to be, do they hit on going from Sam Howell, who's arguably a top 5 quarterback at the position right now, to whoever comes in.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to replace Sam Howell up there. But yeah, I was watching a little bit of FSU of Carolina last week against Florida State. I can't. Let me remind you, this is the same Florida State that lost to Jacksonville State at home, and yet they're turning, and then they come out and they spank Carolina for the second straight year. How is that possible?
It's the mobile quarterback. Carolina really struggles against the mobile quarterback. Jordan Travis, it's his second year going for over 100 rushing yards against Carolina. It's they have a lot of coverage breakdowns to where Jordan Travis only threw the ball, I think, 13 times, but I think he was like 11 of 13. His quarterback rating was like 253, I'm pretty sure. So it's a Carolina defense. I think the most discouraging part about the Carolina defense this year is that they've made some pretty average to below average quarterbacks look like all Americans. It started week 1 with Burmeister from Virginia Tech. He kind of lit them up. The Georgia State quarterback, a lot of people said
Georgia
like if
Tech.
Georgia State, no, they played Georgia State first.
Oh, Georgia State. I'm sorry. So
Yeah, but the Georgia State quarterback, if he was able to throw the ball, a lot of people think that he could have gave Carolina trouble. You go to Georgia Tech, they made Sims look unbelievable in that second half. They make Jordan Travis look unbelievable. Outside of the Duke game, which is kind of looking like the only, it's looking like the outlier now, where Duke just doesn't have the talent to really contend in the ACC. It's a defense that has made a lot of average to below average quarterbacks look great, which is it's not ideal because it stinks that Derek King is out for the season.
Yeah, Derek King is out for the year, by the way. Yes, we're gonna go
Yeah,
Tyler Van Dyke tomorrow.
yeah, I'm always a fan of. I want teams full strength. I want the best players out there playing. And I really do like what De'Ara King can bring to an offense. But now it's Tyler Van Dyke, like you mentioned, and um, it's a it's a fan base for Carolina where it's like you could tell us that Tyler Van Dyke, he throws for just 200 yards, 50% against Virginia, but it's a fan base that's like he's going to put up extreme numbers. And I also left out Brennan Armstrong, where Carolina beats Virginia, but Brennan Armstrong throws for over 500 yards. It's a defense that they really struggle against quarterbacks, and I, Van Dyke, from watching the Virginia game, he didn't look like the most mobile quarterback that traditionally gives Carolina a lot of problems, like a De'Ara King. But it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of handle him, because I think he does have an ability to kind of take off. I'm I can remember, I think he broke one rush against the Virginia for 20 plus yards. So the ability is there for a defense that gives up a lot of open lanes.
Yeah, I noticed what Carolina does, and I'm looking at the penalties here. Now, last week, 12 penalties for 110 yards, easily the most all year. Now, the kicker was a home game, but the one that killed Carolina when I was watching was false starts, offensive side penalties. That should never be an issue when you're playing in Chapel here, and yet I've noticed you haven't been able to play clean football. You can forgive one penalty, but the targeting penalty, I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. You can't do that.
Yeah, the 12 penalties, I think it's the result of a team just being frustrated that what they're trying to do isn't working, and it's a team that doesn't really um, they haven't really handled the adversity well this season at all. They go down against Georgia Tech, that game spirals out of control. They go up early against Florida State. They're probably feeling themselves a bit, and then once Florida State kind of gets them back, that game's over. That game spirals out of control. And I think what you're seeing with some of these penalties, the unsportsmanlike, the false start, the pass interferences, it's a team that's pressing right now. And when one thing starts to go bad, they kind of get in their own heads, and it's just one mistake after the other at this point.
Yeah, I look at Carolina. Outside of Downs, who else do they really have? Yes, they have Brown, Simmons, and Green, but really I've seen Carolina's big weapon in the passing game is really Josh Downs.
Yeah, Josh Downs has been the only big option from the passing game, and I think you're going to start to see defensive coordinators try to throw some bracket coverage and just kind of take him out of games. Kamari Morales has kind of emerged at the tight end position. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight games now. He's becoming a pretty viable option in the red zone. But outside of Downs, outside of Morales, there's been a need for more production at the receiver and at the tight end position. So I think one thing that Carolina has kind of turned to lately has been running Sam Howell more. We didn't really see that last year, but this team they can kind of sense that for them to win and for them to be in games, they need Sam Howell to maximize what he can do through the ground game. And I think I think not 3 straight games, but 3 games this year. So in half the game, Sam Howell's rushed for 100 yards, and I want to say, yeah, he's only 100 yards short of the leading rusher, Ty Chandler. Howell has 396 yards rushing this year, 3 touchdowns. So we're seeing more of Sam Howell in the run game because of how non-productive his receivers have been outside of Josh Downs, like you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. When I saw last year at Hard Rock, 544 from Carter and Williams, and basically Carter went 308 and 2 TDs, and Williams 236 and 3 TDs last year. Obviously, this is not the same Carolina team rushing the football that we saw at Hard Rock last year when they blew us out.
Yeah, there's definitely no Michael Carter, no Javonte Williams, and I think they're missing Carter's ability offensively for sure, but I think they're missing him even more in that locker room and being a leader in that locker room, and they're just missing that presence. But yeah, I think Carter and Williams, they hit a lot of deficiencies in the offense last year, and it's a situation where they really haven't been able to find somebody else to kind of hide those deficiencies because this offensive line struggles at times. The receivers, they don't create as much separation. I think you could also throw in De'Ami Brown in there for that ability to hide deficiencies because his ability to stretch the field as a deep threat is something that Carolina is drastically missing at this point in the year. And yeah, it's been a bit surprising that the skill guys have struggled this much because even in Carolina's down years, dating back to the early Fedora days, the skill position guys have never been a concern of this team. It's normally the defense is a concern, but offense and putting up points has never really been a worry. And now you're looking around, and there's been a couple of times this year, the Virginia Tech game, for example, where I thought the defense played well enough to win that game, but the offense was really what let them down. And I think the same thing could be said for that Georgia Tech game where Carolina is down, I believe, 13-7 at halftime, where you tell some hold Georgia Tech 13 points at half. This Carolina offense should have no problem scoring against Tech because the next week I think Georgia Tech was playing Pittsburgh, and you could see the score at halftime of that game. It was like Pittsburgh had scored like 40 plus points. So like one thing if this Carolina team was losing to really good teams, nationally ranked teams, but you can't tell me that Georgia Tech and Florida State are are better teams than Carolina. But at this point in the season, I guess you they're really not, and they're all kind of one and the same when you look at these teams in the ACC.
Yeah, definitely. And last year on our defense this week, and we're coming off a bye week. Casey, and Manny Diaz has not done well off bye weeks, though they did win at Carolina State last year. But yeah, 778 yards last year, 554 on the ground. I mean, everyone here has talked about mostly the players have said, hey, this is a team, this is a defense that's still, trying to redeem itself from last year's game up there. Even Sam Howell said, and I quote, "We haven't even talked about last year's game." I wonder if that's by design.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any reason to talk about last year's game because Carolina Carolina knows how much production they're missing from that game. Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, De'Ami Brown, Daz Newsome. Defensively, Chaz Surratt, I think, is another guy who kind of didn't get the recognition and the praise he deserved for this Carolina defense because he's flying around making tackles. At times, he's so fast and so athletic on that defense. He's covering for a lot of guys' mistakes. So when a play breaks down, a lot of fans could be like, "Oh, Chaz Surratt, it must be him who's getting late to the ball because he's the one making the tackle." But I think we're kind of seeing that he played a lot bigger impact on this team's defense than a lot of people wanted to give him credit for last year.
Yeah, give me my keys to the. Let me give you Miami's keys to the game tomorrow for me. One, get to Howell early. We like to have an aggressive rush. That means we can get home without blitzing, i.e., four. But another thing, we have to get the running. Miami has to get the running game going, and also, Miami must protect Tyler Van Dyke in this game as well.
Yeah, I like those keys. This Carolina pass rush has been a little inconsistent this year, only 11 sacks through 6 games. I think a lot of people thought that number would be a bit higher. And then offensively, when you're looking at this Carolina offensive line, it's a combination of receivers not creating separation. Sam Howell holds onto the ball too long, and the offensive line hasn't been that good at pass rush. And their ability to pass off twists has been a problem all year. It looked a little better against Florida State, but it's something that they've put on film consistently, and more defensive coordinators are going to try to expose that. When you look at sacks allowed per game, Carolina is giving up 3.83 sacks per game, which is 124th in the country.
Yeah.
Only Notre Dame is worse in terms of Power Five schools. And like you mentioned, protecting Van Dyke, Miami is in close company there. They're 116th in the country, giving up 3.2 sacks per game. So
Yeah, I have seen
it's
that.
it's going to be this game very well could come down to which quarterback has the better protection. I think that's a great point you made.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think I'm looking at the Carolina defense numbers: 26.7 points per game allowed, 76th. And I see 16 players there have at least half a tackle for loss this year. But your best player on defense to me is up front with Miles Murphy, 6.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks.
Yeah, that's been something that's kind of popped up this year. Miles Murphy's emergence. He's only a sophomore. This is kind of like what I was talking about, where the best players on this Carolina defense are sophomores. He's been a lot to handle up front. It's been really encouraging to see him kind of take this next step because early last year he wasn't even playing. So it's a defense that's pretty young. It's Jaquarius Conley, the tackle leader. He's a mix between a nickelback and a safety. Cedric Gray is another sophomore. Just going down the list, it's Jaquarius Conley, it's Cedric Gray, it's Kamon Rucker, it's Miles Murphy, Tony Grimes. There's Javari Ritzy is a true freshman. Des Evans was a former 5-star who's in his sophomore year. It's a really young defense, which is why they probably have a lot more communication issues than some people would expect. But at the end of the day, it's a very young defense.
Yeah, and you can see, and for Miami to win this game, for me, we have to tackle in space, and that tackling has been a big problem down here with this defense all year long. Number two, Miami has to be able to read the inside zone, and that helped out FSU. And if Van Dyke can improve his running ability, I mean that could be a big problem for Carolina. Also, the kicking game. And on PATs, Carolina's kicker is perfect and it's 5 for 8 on field goals. But I think it's going to also flipping the field. Special teams is going to be key. Lou Headley's been doing very well, but we have to do better in our return and coverage schemes. That's Miami. I'm looking at what are your 3 keys for Carolina to win this ball game?
I'd like to see a receiver emerge outside of Josh Downs. I'd like to see the communication issues cleaned up defensively. That's been a big emphasis this week for practice, and I'd like to see more of a balanced offense, and getting somebody like Ty Chandler or getting somebody like DJ Jones going, where Carolina offense, it feels a little too reliant on Sam Howell at times, and he's a great quarterback, one of the best in college football, but I don't think it's fair to him to kind of put as much pressure as this offense does at times on him. And I think getting somebody like Chandler or getting somebody like DJ Jones going would be a great start for that.
Absolutely. I think I'll have to agree on that point also. Taylor, before I get you out of here, prediction tomorrow.
Yeah, I went back and listened to the one last year. I predicted a Miami win. Was obviously dead wrong about that. So I think this Carolina team really needs this win. It would be a completely different game if Derek King was there. So I'm going to predict a Carolina win. I think defensively they're going to figure out some of the communication issues, and it's going to be a result of getting some players out, I think, and putting in guys that they know are going to communicate better. They might not be as athletic or as talented as some of the other guys, but I think the thought process there is get guys in that can communicate, and the defense is going to look a lot more sound. So I think when you factor that in, when you factor Carolina's at home, they're a 7-point favorite tomorrow. if a game's ever a toss up for me, I look at the quarterback battle, and no offense to Miami, but I'm picking Sam Howell over Tyler Van Dyke. So that's kind of how it comes down for me and for my prediction. But yeah, I would predict a close Carolina win. I'm not sure if this team is good enough to blow teams out like the team obviously last year.
I'm going to say this, Taylor. The talk down here after you hear this podcast this morning, to me, many think this is Manny Diaz's last stand. If he does not win this game and loses to Carolina for a third straight year, especially this Carolina team this year, many think it's the end of the road, and he's gone. He's probably going to be, and he might be gone. In fact, some say he will be gone if he loses this game. That being said, I think this team is still going to come together. This team's going to, I think, close ranks and start to pull it all together. And I think, yes, on the road, if you remember 2 years ago, the 4th and 9 team, that when we made our last trip up to Chapel Hill, that was the game we let get away. Miami let get away. I think in this ball game, I think all the pressure really is on Manny Diaz to win this game, coming off a bye week, which has never been good. In the end, I think Miami comes up with a big road victory. I'm going to go Miami 34, North Carolina 28.
Yeah, I could definitely. If Miami does lose, what's your prediction? Is this the last?
A lot of people down here are saying if you lose to Carolina for a third straight year, and I said this, Taylor, when the season started. Carolina was, for me, going to determine really Manny's future. You could not lose to Carolina for a third straight season and expect to survive. And given what's gone down this season, and everybody down in our fan base down in South Florida has said Manny is gone if he loses this game. For me, it would be the nail in the coffin. I got to think Manny buys another week, but I really think Manny will I think Miami finds a way to win this game tomorrow.
Yeah, like I said, I could see this game going either way with how these two teams are coming in. It's two pretty average teams. So something's got to give, I guess, right?
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. Hey, listen, Taylor, thank you so much for being here today. We look forward. We'll talk again soon down the road.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.